दिल में तेरा घर है या सूफी पिया तेरी निस्बत का सर है.
Now, if you enjoyed listening to that, I want you to remember that you've been blessed with this ability to actually do that. And there is a whole entire population on this planet that are blessed in other ways. They don't have the ability to hear what you just heard. Deaf Awareness Month is the month of September, the international month for deaf people in commemoration of the First World Congress of the World Federation of the Deaf, which took place in September back in 1951. And as we wrap up September, we thought it'd be best to bring awareness and perhaps some people in, or some people will learn new information. So whilst you're there listening in on your radio sets, we remind you that we're live on Facebook, live on YouTube, and more as well. And joining us this morning, as promised much earlier, is Professor Victor de Andrade, an audiologist and associate professor in the Department of Speech Pathology and Audiology at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. He's also a member of the South African Speech Language Hearing Association. Victor is also the chairperson of the People for the Awareness of Disability Issues organization. Professor, good morning to you. Welcome to the Breakfast Rush on Radio Al Ansar.
Good morning and salam to everybody.
What a pleasure to have you on the program this morning, Professor. Can you explain the significance of National Deaf Awareness Month and its goals?
Thank you, and thanks again for the opportunity to foreground this very important matter, especially in the year in which we've recognized South African Sign Language as an official language in the country. So this month is dedicated to recognizing the particular experiences, the particular contextual requirements for people who are deaf. And in South Africa, we have the privilege, like I said, of having South African Sign Language recognized as an official language, which does give it a specific status, and it does recognize then the deaf community as a population who is requiring us to be less stigma, to have less anticipation around some of the challenges with communicating with deaf people. So in this month, we are especially encouraging the opportunity for deaf people to be included in communities, for us to avoid the opportunities for exclusion, avoiding opportunities for stigma, for avoiding opportunities of social isolation. And in deaf communities, especially, and in South Africa, we have a very vibrant deaf community. We have a long history of deaf education in the country, the development of deaf communities, deaf clubs. So it's very important for us to recognize this as an opportunity to, especially, and another consideration is in Heritage Month. So recognizing the diversity of our cultures, the diversity of our languages, and the diversity of our society.
Prof, what are the common causes of hearing loss, and how can people recognize the symptoms early?
Sure. So there are very many reasons. Some of the reasons are acquired deafnesses. So those are deafnesses that we may acquire in our lives, maybe due to noise exposure, maybe due to certain illnesses such as mumps or measles or meningitis. Some of the acquired conditions come through from exposure to certain ototoxic medications or certain ototoxic elements. So people who may be receiving life-saving chemotherapy may also then be at risk for hearing loss, because the chemotherapy is a very strong medication, and so it may have an impact on hearing. And there are also conditions that might be due to trauma, due to injury, etc. So those tend to be some of the acquired deafnesses. And then there are also the congenital deafnesses, so deafnesses that maybe a child is born with, so maybe due to the mom having had measles during pregnancy, or having had cytomegalovirus, or a range of situations that may have arisen during the pregnancy that have resulted in congenital deafness. But there are also deafnesses that run in families. So there are some genetic deafnesses where there may be families where there are members of the family who have been born deaf, and there is then a likelihood that subsequent children may also be born deaf.
Indeed, thank you for that. How does hearing loss specifically impact children in terms of language development and education?
So language development, as we all know, is something that happens quite naturally for many children. And children are exposed to language, they're immersed in the language, and so they're learning the language in their environment. For children who are deaf, or for children who have hearing difficulties, it is more difficult to just get that language. And so very many times, children who are born deaf may be born to hearing parents, and so they don't get the language exposure, so they don't have the opportunity to hear, so they also don't learn the language, and so their language may be delayed, especially because they're not getting the auditory signal. And so it is important for children who are deaf to be diagnosed quite early, so that there is an opportunity to encourage language development. And so be it spoken language or signed language, but to have the language develop. And so the kinds of difficulties that we often see with children who have hearing difficulties is if somebody's born deaf, then there's a delay in the language acquisition and difficulties in hearing certain of the sounds and then reproducing those sounds. Other children may also develop what's called an otitis media, and it's very common in children where they get an ear infection, what we call a middle ear infection. And so then that's when fluid builds up in the middle ear due to an infection, not fluid from swimming or bathing. That's another thing, that's otitis externa. But many children get otitis media, so a middle ear infection where they then struggle to hear. It's like if we imagine us in the bath or in the swimming pool and somebody's talking, there's fluid in our ears, and that's very difficult to hear. So children may have those difficulties, and then they may struggle to also pick up some of the sounds, the language. But also what we see is that children may develop something called auditory processing difficulty. So because there have been interruptions in their hearing because of the otitis media, because of the infection, they're hearing, then they don't hear, then they hear okay, then they hear somewhat okay, then they may be able to hear physiologically, but the way that they process sound may be impaired. So there are these various challenges that we expose to in terms of hearing and language development right from an early age. Having said that, though, we're very fortunate that the way technology has progressed, nowadays we can screen hearing from as early as 6 hours old. So when a baby is born, the baby can be offered a hearing screening through something called otoacoustic emissions. And then if that's a clear response, there's follow-up later if need be. If the responses are unclear, then there are opportunities to do some more screening and then diagnostic assessment, so that we're not very delayed in our identification of deafness, but rather identifying babies very early on to then give the kind of input we were talking about earlier, the language, be it spoken or signed, but being able to offer opportunities for hearing aids if need be, or any other sort of support that the child or the parents may need.
Prof, as a final question for this morning, what steps can families take to support loved ones experiencing hearing loss?
So I guess the first thing, and this is a given, is love. We need to be able to make sure that we recognize the importance of love in all of this. We can't exclude that. But at the same time, we recognize that it is maybe a new path and an inexperienced opportunity to learn more about deafness, to link up with other deaf parents, to link up with other people who have been in similar situations for advice. There are some organizations such as High Hopes, or even getting in touch with an organization such as SASLA, the South African Speech Language Hearing Association, to get more advice or to get referral to support, be it the support of an audiologist to monitor the child's hearing over time and to support the child in terms of hearing aids and amplification, schooling options, etc. So there are a range of different opportunities. So I'd encourage people to get in touch with the audiologist, speech language hearing association, etc.
Absolutely. Prof, very insightful this morning. We're very grateful for your time on the program. And, you know, with you and your team's work in the or at the university, we want to wish you guys all of the very best. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. Take care and good morning.
That was Professor Victor de Andrade, an audiologist and associate professor in the Department of Speech Pathology and Audiology at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. It's your breakfast rush, a few drops after 7, and looking forward to a news bulletin that's coming up in a moment with Tabile Duma, but also reminding you South African motorists are lined up for more petrol price relief in the month of October, with the latest data from the Central Energy Fund showing more than R1 per litre over recovery for both petrol and diesel. So, should this expected price cut come through next week, this could be a massive R4.60 cut in petrol prices